We're going to address one of the biggest questions people have when learning photography. Why shoot in RAW? What's the big deal? What's the difference between RAW and JPEG? Well, let's talk about it. So for me, this was one of the biggest things that changed my photography. Along with learning to shoot in manual, this had a huge effect on my photographs, on the end result in particular. Up until then, I was shooting JPEG and essentially I was trying to edit stuff and then not edit things, and it just wasn't working for me. Whereas RAW actually really changed the way I looked at photographs, changed the way I expose things as well, and then obviously massively changed my editing process as well. But what is RAW and what are JPEGs and what's the deal with all of that? So in your camera, you'll probably see there are a few different file types you can shoot in. Generally speaking, there'll be JPEG and RAW. And you'll have a few different quality options for JPEG, so medium, high, fine, extra fine. And then you'll have RAW separate to that. And a lot of cameras will shoot RAW and JPEG side by side so that you have both file types. And where JPEG captures kind of the scene that you're looking at, pretty much as you've exposed it, as you've looked at it, RAW captures the entire data that the sensor has when you take that photo. It's a much, much bigger file size. So in certain situations on my A7 III, for example, that I'm filming on right now, it's about 50 megabytes for one RAW photo. So that's quite a big size, especially if you're taking a lot of photos. You're gonna fill your card up quite quickly. But the upside of that is it's capturing a huge amount of data. And that means when you come to edit your photo, there's an awful lot that you can do. First of all, you've got the exposure. You are able to really push and pull the highlights, the shadows, the overall exposure. You can retrieve a lot more data back from highlights, for example, a blown out sky. You can pull that back much easier than you can with JPEG. You can push those shadows up as well, get a lot of detail out of there, or you can affect the overall exposure of a photo without having it kind of break apart. Now, if you do a lot of that with a JPEG, you are going to see significant damage to the photo, whether that's in terms of color banding in the sky, for example, whether there's loads of color noise or digital noise. That's just not going to be very good. So with JPEGs, you're set with pretty much what you photographed and a little bit either side when it comes to exposure. And with RAW photos, you can do almost anything you like. There's obviously a limit to what you can retrieve in terms of highlights and stuff like that, but it does give you a huge amount of room to pull things back. Now, of course, that also applies to things like color. There's a lot more room to change things like the hue of different colors, saturation, luminosity of different colors. So if you want to play around with that, and let's say you want to create a nice orange and teal look for your photo, it's going to be much easier to do that with a RAW photo because there's a lot more data to actually manipulate and change. Again, if you do it with a JPEG photo, things are going to break apart, colors are going to look very unnatural, it's not going to work very well, and the end result is going to be quite damaged. Whereas with a RAW photo, you don't have to worry about any of that. And in addition, you can completely alter the white balance of a RAW photo as if you were doing it while taking the photo. You're not kind of adding in a bit of a warm tint or a cool tint or just a bit of pink or magenta or a bit of green. You're actually actively changing the white balance of the photo. And that's huge. If you try and do that with JPEG, again, things are going to break apart pretty easy. But with RAW, you've got a huge amount of room to actually manipulate that white balance to exactly what you wanted. Now, this can be great for either correcting it if it was wrong. So if, like me, you just rely on auto white balance a lot, too much, to be honest, you can correct things later without any issue at all. Whereas with JPEG, you can't necessarily do that. Of course, this also means that, let's say you take a photo of a sunset, you can warm things up, you can bring that warmth back into it, and again, without any breakup in the actual image. Ultimately, when it comes to RAW photos, you're capturing the highest quality that you possibly can, the most data available to you. And that generally always means the highest quality output at the end. The highest input is realistically going to make the highest output as well. So the best quality photo that you can take. Now, of course, this isn't always ideal. They need editing in a program, whereas JPEGs don't necessarily need that. You know, JPEGs can be great straight out of camera, and especially if you use something like, let's say, a Fujifilm, which have fantastic film simulation modes, you can get some great photos straight out of camera without having to then edit them later. So It does depend a little bit on what kind of stuff you're going for. Are you just taking some photos and you want to upload them straight to the internet, or you want to just save them and have them, you don't want to worry about editing? Well, then JPEG really is probably going to be the one you want to go for. It's going to massively reduce how much post-processing you're going to be doing. Whereas if you want to actually take the time to edit and all that kind of stuff, RAW photos are always going to provide you with the best quality output at the end. I take every photo, I'd say. I think I take every single photo in RAW because I am someone who enjoys editing, and I always know that what I want to be able to do is affect the look of my photo afterwards, no matter what. So for me personally, I will always shoot in RAW. It also means that you have that photo saved as a RAW photo. You can go back and re-edit it in different ways later. And that's a big deal as well, because you might enjoy a certain style right now, and then later down the line, you might have a different editing style. And if you want to, with the RAW photo, you can go back and apply that new editing style to the photo without it breaking apart like a JPEG might. At the end of the day, RAW photos just allow you a huge amount of control over the end result of your photo: color, exposure, white balance, pretty much everything, even extending to sharpening, unsharpening, all that kind of stuff. It just is gonna look better with a RAW photo, and you're gonna have way more room to play around with that. Now, we had a video last week all about learning manual photography in 10 minutes. This video is also obviously aimed at learning photography. We've got this whole new series going. We're gonna have a video every Thursday. Anything you would like to see in the journey of learning photography, let me know down in the comments, because I'm keen to try and address everything that someone might wanna know learning photography and kind of go through things. Obviously, we can talk about composition, various things like that, but anything that you actually would like to know to do with learning photography, kind of from, we've done manual now, RAW, where are we going next? Let me know down in the comments, and I'll absolutely try and get to that, because I think that's a good journey, and I'd love to know your thoughts on that as well. Of course, if you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe. That helps me out a huge amount. I will see you next week. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.